and welcome to the S.T.E.M Talk Series, an alternative platform for providing skills development and career information. The idea behind this is to have an informal platform to have such discussions and relate STEM education to a variety of careers and sectors. This series is powered by STEM Mets, and I am the co-founder and CEO, Jadesola Adideji. And we are based in Lagos, and the aim of what we're doing is to bridge the skills gap in education, as well as prepare our students for the future workplace. So I'm excited to have with us today our guest, Dr. Abasi Ene-Obong. He's the founder and CEO of 54 Gene, a Nigerian company in the health technology sector. So a brief background on Dr. Abasi. He has a PhD in cancer biology from University of London, a master's in human molecular genetics from Imperial College, and an MBA from Claremont Colleges. He has extensive experience across the UK, US, and Nigerian healthcare industries, and has worked for a variety of companies in different sectors. So we're excited to have you here today, Dr. Abasi. You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Jadesola.
So if I were to describe your company, and I'm lifting this off your bio, it says it's a health technology company advancing the state of healthcare through large-scale discovery and translational research, advanced molecular diagnostics, and clinical programs for the benefit of Africans and the global population. So because I have a background in life sciences, if I'm to break it down, I see R&D, I see diagnostics, I see clinical trials, but why don't you break it down for us in layman's language?
So you broke it down actually very well. Using genetics technologies, we are able to find interesting biological pathways which can provide insights that we haven't known as humans up to date. And those insights can be translated into new drugs or diagnostics. So I'll give an example. There was a study conducted in the US where they got samples from volunteers. So people volunteered their DNA information. And they found that in a group of Africans in that study, they had a mutation that resulted in them having very low bad cholesterol levels. What then happened was, because this was new insight, researchers were able to understand the pathway that resulted in those very low bad cholesterol levels. And they were able to create a monoclonal antibody, which is an antibody that targets that particular pathway. And that monoclonal antibody is now being sold as a medicine in the US and in Europe to treat for people with cardiovascular disease. Right. So our genetic makeup holds keys to certain, transformations or to certain insights that could be translated into new products that benefit all mankind. And it's not just Africans, it's African genetic makeup, Caucasian, etc. But most other groups have been studied. Africans, not so much, because we haven't had a company doing it or the infrastructure to do it. And so there's a gap in that information. So that's what we do where we talk about large-scale translational research.
Right.
On the molecular diagnostics side, it's really using, again, understanding genetics and using genetics to inform, the diagnosis of a disease and to know what drug to place a patient on. So a classical example would be breast cancer. In breast cancer, you have HER2 breast cancer, you have progesterone cancer, you have estrogen receptor breast cancer. All of those various breast cancers have molecular markers that make them different from each other. And in order to be able to treat those cancers, you need to know which type of breast cancer it is, and then know the drug that has been made specifically for that type of breast cancer. Now,
Right.
the problem we have in Nigeria and many parts of Africa is that our diagnostics industry is not as well developed to do those molecular diagnostics techniques that tells you that somebody has triple negative breast cancer, for example.
Mm, mm,
And so when you don't know what you are treating, how do you treat it? You know, when you don't know that this patient will benefit from Herceptin because it's a do you know, to give them Herceptin?
mm,
And then, of course, clinical trials is when a new drug is made, it has to be trialed on humans. And you go through what we call a phase one, phase two, phase three trials.
mm,
Phase one being a safety trial to show when you give the drug in very small doses to show that the drug is safe in humans. And then phase two is when you increase that pool of patients, and you give them that drug to test for not only safety again, but to see that the drug has efficacy. In other words, it meets some of the endpoints that you are looking at. So let's say that you have a hypothesis that by giving this drug, it will reduce this uh, I'm looking for a good way to say it in layman's terms, and I know I've not been using
So,
layman's
so
terms.
basically, so basically, it will reduce whatever it is that the problem is. So if I can
Yeah,
just summarize, if we look into health technology and biotechnology, is really applying technology to biology in essence, to
exactly.
molecular processes or molecular structures for the betterment of health. It could
Correct.
be applied to health, it could be applied to foods and agriculture,
Correct.
and it could
Yeah,
be applied to environmental solutions. So it's really
exactly.
focusing on technology and biology and developing processes and possibly drug products out of that. So my
Yeah.
next question is really to, thank you for explaining that in detail, is really to now drill down. So for instance, why the name 54 gene?
54 to represent the 54 countries in Africa.
Mhm.
So there are 54 countries in Africa. We aim to be Pan-African, to be able to bring clinical innovation to people in Africa.
Hmm.
So that's why 54 gene.
Okay. And so basically, it's really trying to, I mean, my eyes were drawn in the definition that said benefits of Africans. So explain to us the genetic, what is so unique about us as African with our genetic makeup, and why you decided to, start this company, because maybe we weren't being given the attention that we needed in the pharmaceutical industry as Africans. We weren't, the attention wasn't really being placed on us. Not that we think we're extra special, which we are, but what was it? What was that thing that ticked you off that you said, you know what, I'm going to do something about this?
So as at the last count, genetic studies that involved people like Africans. Um, Sorry, I'm on the road and there's traffic, so I hope it's not disturbing. So as the last count, I think Africans had only made up about 3% of genome-wide association studies, which is the major type of genetic studies to look for variations in the gene that could pinpoint to a cause, right? To a disease or to a benefit. Um, and when you think about it, there are more than Africans make up more than 14% of the world, right? And that's when you look at Africans as Africans.
Mm.
But then when you even start looking at people of African ancestry,
Yeah.
that number balloons, but yet we are seeing just about 3% of them of them being involved in research. What that means is that many of the medicines that are made are not made to work in us, because sometimes your genetic makeup also affects the way you metabolize a drug.
Mm.
In other
Great
words,
fun.
it's yeah. In other words, it affects the way that the drug either works on you or gives you side effects.
Right.
Um, and nobody studies most of this, or people have not been studying most of this. And that's because, again, there's lots of reasons, but to your point, we were sidelined in most of these studies, and we continue to be sidelined. That's why I started 54 Gene, and we look at it as, you know, providing equality to precision medicine.
Right.
Precision medicine is where medicine is today, where there are subtypes of diseases, right? A disease is no longer a disease. A disease is made up of multiple diseases, just like cancers are made up of multiple cancers by organs. And even within the organ, pancreatic cancer, for example, you have cholangiocarcinoma, pancreatic ductal adenocarcinoma, mucinous cystic neoplasm, all within that same, organ. And, precision medicine basically looks at how do you carve out the exact ailment and tackle it, right? So that you're not, causing lots of side effects. The issue is that we have been sidelined for most of this research. And even when the drugs are made and trialed, the US's FDA released a study, a report last year, end of last year, that said that over the past 10 years, people of African origin only contributed to 5% of clinical trials.
Trials.
And when you look at clinical trials by subtype, looking at, for example, oncology cancer trials, that number came to 2%. The same for cardiovascular disease. So you then have this situation that drug companies don't know if their drugs work in Africans or even cause side effects. It's like the HIV drug called efavirenz. It's been found that that drug causes side effects in 25% of Africans that take that drug. But when it was going through trials, because they were not Africans were not included, those findings were not there, right? So
So
these are some of
we're even missing out on treatment outcomes,
yeah,
because if they don't understand how it affects Africans, one, the drug might not work in our system.
yep,
So there's probably higher mortality in Africans for certain things. Two, as you said, we may be reacting adversely to the drugs. So if we're not so it all goes back to being included in even
yeah.
pharmaceutical drug development, which is what 54 Gene is doing. And from my understanding, that happens in a couple of ways. You're, storing data on African genetics, in essence, by taking samples. So tell us a bit about the Biobank, and what that is.
So a biobank is a collection of biological samples for the purposes of research. A biobank is not a new thing. There are biobanks across the world. The UK Biobank, for example, has 500,000 participants, all volunteers.
Yeah.
China, I think, has like over 1 million people in its biobank. You have FinGen, which is Finland's biobank. You have Iceland, which had Decode Genetics, created the biobank. Ireland, Genomic Medicine Ireland was the biobank. So it's not new. Many universities in the US, University of Pennsylvania, etc., they all have their own biobanks, which really spurs research. What we saw was that there was a lack of African biobanks. So that was another reason research was not being carried out amongst Africans.
Okay.
And a biobank is not just about storing samples. It's it's about curating what goes in there, making sure that every sample in there has people understanding, first of all, volunteering to be a part of that and understanding what they're volunteering for. So you need to get informed consents. You need to get the right ethical approvals, right, from the regulatory bodies before you can actually have a biobank. And so what we have done is we've started building out this I guess this Pan-African biobank to really spur research. It's becoming a platform that African researchers or people interested in African science can plug into.
Mm,
Because outside of just the samples and the additional phenotypic data that goes with them, we are now setting up in the process of setting up one of the most advanced genomic laboratories in Africa, here in Nigeria, right? Where before people will have to send the samples to Europe or the US, we've decided that, we're going to keep it within the continent. It's going to be a way to train people, students, graduates in genetics. It's going to give new jobs, it's already given jobs. And as a result, African scientists can also key into that information and publish world-class papers, which is something that has also been lacking amongst African researchers based in Nigeria and in Africa.
mm.
So that's the platform we are building now, and and that's what the 54 Gene Biobank is about.
Fantastic. So you touched on one of the points I wanted to speak about as well, which is, as I said earlier, this platform is to discuss skills development and career guidance information. And so with your background, as I said, 2 or more degrees in life sciences, and typically such a background is destined for R&D lab or academia.
Yep.
Clearly you veered into business. And so I wanted to touch on, certain degrees which traditionally are sort of, downlooked upon in Nigeria. So, medical and biological sciences, microbiology, biochemistry, and things like that, laboratory technology. Typically in our structure, those are looked at as second-hand degrees that maybe you didn't get into medicine or pharmacy. That's why you chose to do that. But with a company like yours, I see opportunity here in terms of
Yeah.
one, encouraging people to pursue such degrees. And then secondly, as a platform for learning and discouraging what I call in our culture, that sort of condescending approach that, oh, you want to be a teacher. I remember when I
Yeah.
wanted to apply for pharmacy and I didn't make the grades. I think I got in for medicinal chemistry or something. And my dad was like, well, that's not a professional degree. What do you want to be? A
Yeah.
teacher? As if that's a bad thing. How do you see 54 Gene helping to change that narrative?
I mean, my life is already an example of that narrative being changed.
Mm,
Like most people who do biomedical sciences, I also wanted to do medicine and surgery at some point. I find that that is not just the case for Nigeria. I also have friends from all walks of life and races who, ventured into biomedical sciences because they wanted to do medicine, right? But at some point during that journey, what we realized is that the world is in need of biomedical scientists.
mhm.
In fact, the US has a program where it awards green cards to people that, basically it gives what they call a national interest waiver to people that it considers are of the national interest of the US. And guess which of the people these are? These include biomedical scientists,
Mm,
engineers, etc. Right? So, I mean, I have friends and I know people who've gotten green cards, not medical doctors, but within 1 year of getting to the US because they had PhDs in biomedical sciences, they were snatched up, right? And so it's something that, you know, I even have colleagues, when I was in the UK and the US who started off with medicine and surgery and decided that they wanted to go into biomedical sciences. In the US, you have dual degrees, MD, PhD programs. So I think that in Nigeria, we have to understand that these fields, these subjects are actually what leads to national development,
mm.
because, you know, I'm not, medicine and surgery is wonderful, it saves lives. Um, but a biomedical scientist creates what the doctor uses to save lives,
Right. And
right?
and I'm hoping that you know, series such as this that we're hosting will be able to provide information and maybe start changing the narrative. And having a Nigerian company like 54 Gene in that sort of biomedical, health technology, biotech sector, I'm hoping will encourage more people. But of course, it's understandable because there are no jobs, there are not enough jobs to fit those you know, degree subjects, so to speak. And
Correct.
traditionally,
Yeah.
like I said, going into R&D was like, you know, one, there aren't enough positions to be filled. There's not enough jobs in those areas. And because as a country, R&D has, you know, has never really been of utmost importance in terms of
To us.
our
Yeah.
priorities, it's understandable how, you know, many people will not be geared, you know, towards that. And the other point I wanted to make out, apart from these obvious backgrounds and degrees, is also to say that it's not just even there are new skills and new jobs that are coming out in the biological sciences. And I just pulled something from your website talking about you know, job positions, and it says we're seeking to make new additions to our team to fill the positions of statistical geneticists, statistical epidemiologists. So you have, you know, new careers somewhat, combining biology and math, biology and computer science, bioinformatics. There's even something here for a cybersecurity engineer. You know, so some might be thinking, well, I did computer science. Why would I be looking into a medical company? So my point to highlight here is sort of the new careers or new or evolution of careers that are even coming up. So a math graduate, a data scientist, you know, can work in 54 Gene. Can you speak to the evolution of some of these careers?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll even bring up another position, a medical anthropologist.
Oh, wow.
Whoever knew that,
Medical anthropologist.
whoever knew that those things would be needed. But guess what? They are needed because you want to understand the etiology of disease and understand how human culture and social evolution, has affected, medicine or the health benefits of multiple populations, right? So we are finding that there is now this mishmash of disciplines coming together
Mhm.
to create new science. I find that you have somebody. I have friends who had PhDs in astrophysics, who are now the CSOs of medical companies. Why? You have people in artificial intelligence, with a bachelor's in mathematics, and they go get a genetics degree for like do a 1-year course in Harvard or somewhere to get a genetics degree, and they mix all of that and they bring more insights to unlock more knowledge than if I alone with a genetics degree, had. The beauty about of what science is that now because you can add multiple disciplines and you can unlock more and more and more knowledge. You know, Science or research has moved or is moving away from a place of petri dishes. There's always going to be a role of petri dishes when you do the translation work. But discovery science, when you find, what you should be going after, where you find what we call targets,
Mm.
discovery science has moved more to from animal models of mice,
Right.
trying to, clone mice and spending years to find out, what mutation is causing a particular outcome, to in silico, to computer systems,
Exactly. So
to
computer modeling.
seeing, yeah, to computer modeling, right? And that's the beauty of it. Like, people now coming with all these different disciplines, and science is moving at an accelerated pace.
And for me,
um
what I also, sorry to cut you off, for me, what I also hear in all of that is skills. So skills development and acquiring skills, to the baseline of whatever it is that you learned as your first degree is pertinent. And that takes me to the idea of work experiences and internships. Because I know 54 Gene had, I think, recent graduates in your molecular biology internship program. Can you speak a little bit to that?
So that was a program that we had because of the scourge of COVID-19 in the country. And, one of the things COVID-19 has opened up is the need to have molecular scientists within the country. Um, you know, we've gone from a place where, you know, um, you still have this situation where medical doctors and medical lab scientists are fighting for who should be the people doing the tests for COVID-19. But the truth of the matter is that it's molecular science, it's molecular biology. Um, it could be somebody who studied biology or genetics or even anatomy, biomedical sciences. And so what we saw was there was a gap in those skill sets. We needed more and more people to staff our ever expanding lab network, and we couldn't find people to recruit.
Hmm.
So we had to start training people.
Right.
Sometimes we found people who had some experience, so we got them in, and before we deployed them, we put them through like a 2 weeks program just to make sure that they could really be deployed. And then when we stopped seeing those people, or because those people became harder and harder to find, we had to switch to a training method where we start looking for people with the theoretical knowledge, who may not have had the practical experience because their universities don't have the labs, and there are no companies that were there before to give them those skill sets. And so we started training people, and we're still training people.
So would
um,
you say that would be a long-term part of your business model? Because in essence, you need those people, you need those skills. Is the training and internship and work experience opportunity going to be a long-term thing? And
so
or any potential collaborations with universities that have
mhm.
students on these various, biological science-based degrees?
So I mean, I I believe it will be an ongoing thing. I know that when I was in university, because my bachelor's was in Nigeria, and I know that I wished that I had internship programs
Mm.
that I could develop my skills with. So I want to be able to give what I didn't have back to people, right? There's only so much you can give because we're just one company.
Exactly.
But so we are going to be getting more molecular scientists trained. But in addition to that, we are also going to, I think we'll be doing a clinical research academy, which is different, which is now, like research that happens in the hospitals, clinical studies. So that's something that we will be commencing at some point in the year. We also have plans to give out PhD like studentships,
Mhm.
or grants for PhDs, and people, medical doctors who want to get that scientific as biomedical sciences component.
Right.
So there's a few things in our pipeline,
Pipeline,
and to your point, the company is only as strong as the talent that can work in the company.
for sure.
So training is definitely going to be a big part of what we do.
Fantastic. So I felt it was important to bring that up in terms of practical, hands-on skills development, because I feel that, as you know, with your experience at school, and we've all experienced this, the emphasis is too much on the theoretical aspects of things and not enough on the practical application of knowledge. And so for me, as a co-founder of our company, that skills development was of essence. to us in terms of even starting to develop those skill sets early enough. Let's not wait till they're in university or they're graduates. Let's even
Yeah.
start early on. And so takes me to my next question. Please feel free. We have some questions, a lot of questions coming in the Q&A. We'll get to that in a minute. So as I said earlier, 2 degrees in life sciences and work experience, but that wasn't enough. You proceeded to do an MBA. And, just bringing it to points, the company, not you, let me be clear, recently raised some funds, $15 million in the market. How did you see, well, firstly, why did you decide to pursue an MBA? And how did that help in fundraising?
I mean, it's exactly what we just have been talking about, combining disciplines into one. The more experience you have, the better. Um, at some point in my academic career, I realized that I didn't. I so this is why I say I figured out I was not going to win a Nobel Prize.
Too done early enough for that.
I did think I was that smart, and I figured if I did win, it would be like the lottery, right?
Right.
But I knew that what I could do, what I felt like I had something to give, was to give an opportunity to other people that could help them potentially win a Nobel Prize.
Right.
So for me, at an early stage in my career, I realized, even before my PhD, I realized that I wanted to get an MBA. And so as soon as I finished my PhD, I made a risky move, because I had job offers and all, but I decided that I was going to take a student loan, to do an MBA in the US, and I went and did it. And it showed me, another side to the industry, because post the MBA, I now started working as a management consultant for life science companies. So I worked with the leading healthcare, well, at the time it was the leading healthcare data company in the world, but it's now become the leading contract CRO company in the world. And I was a management consultant to the likes of Pfizer, etc. From there, I moved to PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, still in the US, and was switched into a strategy type consulting for life science companies, helping them launch products internationally. So that's like drugs internationally, helping them do organizational restructuring and things like that. Um, and so that gave me some needed experience and knowledge for how to run my own business, So now to me is that I understand the science, but I also understand the business.
Business.
And I can speak the business language with people who speak the business language. I know what to say to them, right? Because a business person does not always understand the science,
Right.
right? So you know how to translate the message for whichever audience you need to.
So you're
So
able to.
for me, yeah, so I think for me it was important in being able to raise the money that we've raised so far. um and I'm lucky that I had the opportunities.
Fantastic. That's really good. And just one last question regarding financing. I mean, as a Black man, and of course, I don't want to put the race card
Yeah,
in place,
it's there.
a
Yeah,
Black man raising money, and also someone raising money for a company which is a largely R&D company. There's no sort of product in sight. How were you able to convince the stakeholders to provide what I'm calling patient capital? Because the healthcare sector is like the education sector. The
yeah,
benefits are not realized immediately.
immediately. Yeah.
They're somewhere in the future and you can't even predict the impact. How were you able to convince them?
um you know You made a good point as a black man. It's not lost on me that I'm a black man doing what I'm doing, much less doing it in Africa, you
Mm.
know. So that is not lost on me. But you know, I have to say that we have been lucky. I don't know that I have done anything particularly different. I think, okay, so I think what I've done different is not letting labels hold me back, right? So I remember as the way I was able to raise series, our seed funding, where we at the time ended up raising up about 5 million seed. You know, we did this like 3 months after starting the company.
Wow.
So we didn't even have anything to show at
You've
the
had an
time.
excellent pitch deck.
Yeah, but I do remember because I went through an accelerator program in the US,
Yes.
and that accelerator program, again, you know, the data is there. You know, blacks don't typically raise, you know, the type of money that I thought I could raise, much less Africans, you know, blacks in Africa.
Yes.
And I remember I got in there and there was an offer that came in for our fundraise at a low valuation. Well, to me, it was a low valuation. And I was advised to take it, that was what, you know,
It was what?
people with my background and, you know, would typically get, you know, that I should take it and run.
Mm.
And I said no, I refused. I refused to take it. Um, and I ended up raising, like, actually ended up being one of the top performers in terms of money raised, valuations, etc., of the accelerator, right? And it's the world's leading, startup accelerator.
No.
And you know, again, I just think it's you need to follow the beat of your own heart. You know, you need to. It involves taking risks, you know, because there will always be the safe choice. The safe choice will always be presented first.
Mm. Got it.
And many times you would want to take the safe choice. And there's nothing wrong if you take the safe choice,
Yeah, if
you
you're
know.
comfortable with that. Yeah.
You know, but you know, for me, I've always wanted to do the extra, you know, to go that extra mile. And I think that that's what has helped me as a black person raising money and doing what I'm doing.
Mm.
Because yes, the barriers are there, but I don't see it and develop a complex. I just see it as something to push through.
Fantastic. Well, great. So let me go to the Q&A. There were quite a few questions in there. I'd like us to touch on that quickly. What ethical or regulatory issues have you encountered in Nigeria so far?
Um, so I mean, Nigeria has good regulations regarding the conduct of um, of genetics research. Um, so I don't think it's been barriers. We've had to work with all ethical bodies, and for us, it's important to do that because
For sure.
if we don't do it, it calls everything we're doing into question. You know, so we have to always be very compliant, you know. So we haven't faced barriers with ethics. We've complied with all of them, and we keep doing so. So I don't think that there has been like hindrances in that
Mhm.
regard.
Right. Okay. What is the sample size of the Nigerian population in your biobank? Is it
That is
mostly focused on
that
Nigerian
is
children?
information we do not reveal at this time.
Sure, that's understandable.
Yeah.
Um, so we have another question here. How do you apply for the molecular training? I would imagine that would. I remember I saw it announced on Twitter at the time, and I know it was your first one. I'm sure
Yeah.
subsequent ones will be announced.
Will be announced, yes. And to be honest, just so people know, we get hundreds to thousands of applications per, you know, per
Right.
advert. So We try to do our best to comb through it. So, but you know, I think that people just, if you really want something, you also have to be persistent, you know?
Mhm.
So
So what would make an outstanding applicant then that would catch your eye or your company's eye, would you say? What
I
skills?
can, because I can't say. If I say it, then then it's
Well,
it
okay,
loses.
that's fair. That's fair. I would say, skills. I would
Mhm,
say even reading beyond what you're being told, being aware of what's going on in that sector, being
mhm.
aware and taking your own time to learn outside of what you are learning at school, and don't
Yeah,
just be satisfied. Have a passion for lifelong learning, which I'm taking from
yeah.
your background as well. We have a question here. What's your advice for recent graduates wanting to proceed to the US for PhD degree? That they can, what is that one thing you want them to take that is peculiar to your journey? One advice for someone proceeding.
The one thing, it's difficult doing PhDs outside Nigeria. As a Nigerian, I'm not going to lie, because the model that most PhDs have is that you have to have funding for the PhD, right? So it's like a PhD fellowship or some type of studentship, many times ranging in the hundreds of thousands of pounds or dollars, you know, because most fellowships will fund the research, etc. So PhDs, at least from my experience, are not like, you know, at least PhDs in the research space are not like, say, a master's or a bachelor's, you know. And unfortunately, we don't have enough foundations funding PhDs for Nigerian students.
Right.
Ooh, sorry.
It's okay. Nigeria, we're in Nigeria.
But what I can say, so that I'm not discouraging it, because it happened for me and I know people it's happened for,
Hmm.
is you have to look for the funding. You know, you might be very brilliant, but if that funding is not there, it's difficult to. However, once you find the funding, it's a lot easier, for example, in the UK to get a PhD.
Hmm.
You know, if you have the necessary backgrounds, like the right, you know, like you've done well in your bachelor's, master's, if you can get the funding, and you have to think creatively about how to get the funding, you know, if you can get the funding, you can almost write your way into any school if you have the necessary backgrounds.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you for that. We have one question here. Fast forward 5 years, what would 54 June regard as success within the organization? So in 5 years, what would success look like to you?
5 years, 5 years. We there's a lot of ways that I see success for us in 5 years. I see a Pan-African expansion uh, which will happen a lot sooner. But for me, I really want to see the innovation aspect. I want to see how we have contributed to drugs coming to Africa, to Nigeria, to Africa, medicines that do not typically come. So I'll give you an example. Typically, when a drug is produced and launched, it's only marketed in like the US and the top 5 European countries, etc. By the time it gets to Nigeria, it's probably taken about 15 years, 10 to 15 years. And that's because if I create a drug, I hold the intellectual property,
Mhm.
right? The patents. And that means that nobody anywhere in the world can make that drug unless I give them a license to make that drug. So most pharmaceutical companies typically avoided Africa, focused on markets where they could sell their drugs. And then when they lose the patent 15 years down the line, a generic company in India or China gets a license to reproduce the drug. And then that's when those drugs come to Nigeria. right? Because Nigeria is a market for generics. So what you have is a situation where we as Africans are sometimes 10 to 15 years behind on medical innovation. And so by the time you're getting a drug, people in other countries are already 15 years ahead with the next best thing. You know, I want to change that. I want to see how through various programs, at least people get those drugs at the same time that, you know, people in other countries, developed countries, get those drugs. Um, that's one. So I want to bring clinical innovation. I want to see us bring in, um, you know, research or innovation done by Africans
Mm-hmm.
to life, right? To people. You know, so those are some of the things I would consider success. I want to see us create a new bioeconomy on the continent,
Mm-hmm.
not just as 54 gene, right? But yes, 54 gene being a key part of that, but leading to the formation of other businesses and companies in that ecosystem.
Yeah, I think that's important. Right now, I feel that everything along biomedical is falling on 54 gene shoulder. I'm hoping that 54 gene will serve as an inspiration. And the reason I wanted to do this seminar touching on biotech, especially, is because we've seen a lot in digital technology, in fintech, in health tech, etc. But biotechnology is the one thing that I feel hasn't even gotten any attention at all. And so for me, as a life sciences, it's very important to bring this to the fore. One, to encourage those in those sectors who maybe have been condemned to, a future or thinking of a future doing an unimportant degree, and also highlighting the need and the gap that there still is in our country. So I have questions here. Can anyone volunteer to have samples collected at your biobank? So can I walk into your offices and say I would like to volunteer, or it doesn't work that way?
At the moment, no, it doesn't work that way. We do
That's
it through
great.
studies. So people volunteer to be part of clinical studies. So unless, you know, it's a site where we have a clinical study going on, where we have an approved clinical study going on, we probably will not be able to take any volunteers
So
at this
how
time.
will we know where to find such information? I mean, there may be volunteers out there who would like to, volunteer, or may be, may qualify
Yeah,
for the study.
yeah. So I think that, you know, a time is going to come that maybe a time will come that we will start making public calls for studies.
Okay.
You know, like again, like in the UK, I've been part of a clinical trial in the UK, and I was part of it because I got, you know, there was a public call. I thought it was something of interest, and I enrolled and I qualified, right? So a
Okay.
time might come where we start that. We haven't started that at the moment, but yes, a time might come.
Okay. So we have a question here. Are you partnering with Lagos Research and Innovation Council at all?
Um, we work with various institutions in the
Okay.
Lagos State government. Yes.
Okay. So I have Mr. Folayo Gabriel, Senior Scientific Officer working with the Federal Ministry of Health, who may be interested in a possible collaboration. So maybe there's a way that Mr. Folayo Gabriel can reach out to you. I'm sure you can do that on their website, sir. And
Uh, I mean, if you could, you could also, if you have his details, you could also do an introduction
sure.
to
So
us. Yeah.
Mr. Folayo Gabriel. Okay, so the questions are rolling in. We're trying to pack it all in. Is your company, I mean, this is obvious, but is your company involved in any research relating to the environment at all? Or is it specifically human genetics?
So it's specifically human genetics at the moment. Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. And so I wanted to actually ask you a quick question relating to the company's efforts in the fight against COVID. If you can speak on that recently, there were a lot of private companies that did tremendous work during this time. If you could just briefly touch on that as we start to round up.
So when when we saw that the COVID pandemic was reaching Nigeria, I remember calling my leadership team together, and I had this talk with them, and I told them, you know, guys, more than anybody, we need to do something. If as a biomolecular company or molecular biosciences company, we can't do anything, then what is the benefit of having this company in Nigeria? So for us, it was, you know, something that became a mission, right? And we had the skill sets already. We had the relationships, you know, with suppliers and, you know, internationally, for, you know, both the reagents and the kits and the machines. And so we just basically sprung into action to put all of that together. We raised some money. We contributed and got some other companies too to help, at the time, to help fund, you know, expand the laboratory network in Nigeria.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, at the time this was all happening, Nigeria was able to do only about 200 tests a day.
Yeah.
So that money we're able to use to get PCR equipment and, you know, other things needed to start labs in other parts of the country, as well as increase the capacity within like federal labs. So all that money was spent on public laboratories. Then we also came up with innovative funding models, because there was this issue of, you know, financing to do tests was, you know, most states at the time did not have the monies. So we're able to innovatively partner with private, you know, institutions where they would fund the test and we would carry it out on behalf of states. And so at the moment we're now operating labs in Ogun, Ekiti State, Abuja, Kano, and Lagos. We actually had to slow down at some point, because at some point there was almost a call to have a lab almost everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And you can imagine my team was stretched. We sort of almost doubled in size within 3 months because
Wow.
of it. So, you know, right now we work with, we still do tests, you know, across the country. We probably are one of the highest, our 54 gene labs probably do the highest number of tests, or have done the highest number of any group in the country. At least one of them. We also are looking at other ways that we can bring in additional support, you know, around the COVID, but, you know, from a, you know, either making it more accessible for people to get tests, you know, maybe who knows down the line as we start
Mm-hmm.
thinking vaccines and all, but who knows?
Right.
Let's not talk about that yet.
Right, right. Well, I think the scope is vast. And I think that, you know, from my own little predictive eyes, I think there's a lot that 54 gene can evolve into. You may have to have different tracks within your business plan there, because the need is
Yeah,
there for sure. And for us as a company, as I said, skills development is important to us. And for sure, we would love to continue talking to you and see how we can even take this sort of information to secondary schools, to, you know, even primary schools, in trying to help the children see a future and a career that they
yeah,
can pursue, and being run by a Nigerian company, which is obviously very important to me personally anyway, in highlighting what we're doing for ourselves as Nigerians, for Nigerians, and not necessarily always looking to these superstars abroad, which is great. But I would like more Nigerian students and children to see Nigerian role models in areas that was unknown to them. As I said, everyone wants to be a coder going into fintech or every other kind of tech. We would like to promote the biological sciences. So thank you so much. This has gone so quickly. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate you discussing. I'm sure we'll have you back again because we weren't able to get to all the questions. But thank you again, Dr. Abasi from 54 Gene. Thank you for being here with us today. And so we'll continue next week as we look into STEM and health. We will have Mrs. Fola Laoye speaking to us about STEM in healthcare management, and she's the CEO of Health Markets Africa. You can sign up for this from our Instagram page, STEM_Mets. So please go ahead for next week. And also a reminder that we have our summer tech program going on at the moment. Further information can be found on our website, stem-mets.com. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for sharing your morning with us. Keep well and God bless. Bye-bye.